The world you live in was built by a ghost. You wake up in the morning on a mattress made of synthetic foam. You brush your teeth with a plastic brush using toothpaste squeezed from a plastic tube. You drive to work on asphalt roads in a car powered by gasoline, or perhaps tires made of synthetic rubber. You take medicine prescribed by a doctor trained in a specific curriculum. You send your children to a school that rings bells to signal the changing of subjects. You think these are just unconnected parts of modern life. They are not. They are the enduring fingerprints of one man. Most people know the name, John D. Rockefeller. They know he was rich. They know he was the first billionaire. They might know he had something to do with oil. But that is the kindergarten version of the story. To view Rockefeller merely as a wealthy tycoon is to miss the terrifying scale of his achievement. He did not just make money. He re-engineered the operating system of human civilization. He took a world of chaos and reshaped it into a world of order. His order. He created a system of economic inevitability that surrounds you right now. You cannot opt out of it because you do not even see it. It is the water in the fishbowl. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to a time when the world was dark. Literally dark. Before the mid-19th century, when the sun went down, the world stopped. For thousands of years, humanity huddled around wood fires or expensive whale oil lamps. Night was a prison. Then in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, something black and viscous bubbled up from the ground. It was the 1860s. The American Civil War was raging, but in Titusville, Pennsylvania, a different kind of war had begun. It was the oil rush. It was the Wild West. Prospectors flooded the hills. They were gambling men. They were drunks and dreamers and hustlers. They drilled holes in the ground hoping to get rich quick. It was messy. It was wasteful. It was loud. And watching from the sidelines was a young man who hated mess. He hated waste. And he never ever raised his voice. John D. Rockefeller was not a gambler. He was a bookkeeper. He was a man of silence and ledgers. While other men saw black gold flowing from the ground, Rockefeller saw inefficiency. He looked at the oil rush, and he did not see a business. He saw a disaster. The price of oil fluctuated wildly. One day a barrel was worth $10. The next day it was worth 10 cents. Everyone was drilling, but nobody knew how to refine it properly or ship it efficiently. The barrels leaked. The trains were unreliable. The refineries were prone to exploding. Rockefeller realized something that would change the history of capitalism. He realized that the money was not in the drilling. Drilling was a gamble. The money was in the control. He decided he would not be a participant in the market. He would be the market. This is the story of how one man strangled the free market to save it, and in doing so built the cage we all live in today. The mechanism Rockefeller used was simple but brutal. It is a concept that every modern economist studies, but few understand in its raw, visceral form. It is called consolidation. At the age of 24, Rockefeller bought his first refinery in Cleveland, Ohio. He was obsessed with details. He knew exactly how many drops of solder it took to seal a can of kerosene. If it took 40 drops, he would try 38. If 38 leaked, he would try 39. He cut costs where others bled money. But efficiency was not enough. He needed dominion. Cleveland was the battleground. There were dozens of refineries in Cleveland, all competing to turn crude oil into kerosene for lamps. This competition kept prices low, but it also made profits thin. Rockefeller did not want thin profits. He formed the Standard Oil Company in 1870. The name was a marketing masterstroke. In a world of exploding lamps and bad kerosene, he offered the standard. Safe, reliable, uniform. Then he went to war. He did not use guns. He used the railroads. This is the part of the economic machine that most people miss. Rockefeller understood logistics. He knew that oil was useless if you could not move it. The railroads were desperate for steady business. Rockefeller went to the railroad bosses and made them an offer they could not refuse. He guaranteed them a massive, steady volume of oil shipments every single day. In exchange, he demanded a rebate. He wanted a discount on shipping his oil. But he went further. He demanded a drawback. This meant that every time his competitors shipped oil on the railroad had to pay Rockefeller a fee. Think about that for a second. Imagine you own a pizza shop. Imagine that every time your competitor delivers a pizza, the delivery company pays you $1. You would become rich just by watching your enemy work. And your enemy would bleed to death. This was the secret weapon. It allowed Rockefeller to sell his kerosene cheaper than anyone else. He could sell it at a loss if he had to. He could drive the price down so low that no other refinery could survive. Then came the event known as the Cleveland Massacre. Over the course of a few months in 1872, Rockefeller systematically absorbed his competitors. He would invite a rival refiner to his office. The office was quiet. Rockefeller sat in a chair and listened. He would open his ledger and show the rival the numbers. He knew their business better than they did. He would say calmly that he wanted to buy their refinery. He offered them Standard Oil stock or cash. He advised them to take the stock. He told them that if they refused, he would crush them. He would undercut their prices until they were bankrupt. Most sold. They saw the writing on the wall. They traded their independence for a share in the machine. Those who refused were obliterated. Within months, Rockefeller controlled nearly all the refining capacity in Cleveland. He had conquered a city. Now he wanted the world. This brings us to the second mechanism of the Rockefeller system: vertical integration. Most businesses today stay in their lane. A car company makes cars. A tire company makes tires. Rockefeller did not believe in lanes. He believed in owning the whole road. He stopped paying others to make his barrels. He bought his own forest. He cut his own white oak timber. He built his own kilns to dry the wood. He made his own barrels at a fraction of the cost. He bought the wagons. He bought the pipelines. He eventually bought the oil fields themselves. He removed every middleman. Every time a hand touched his oil and asked for a coin, he chopped that hand off and replaced it with his own. By the late 1870s, Standard Oil controlled 90% of the oil in the United States. Let that sink in. 90%. If you lit a lamp in New York or Chicago or San Francisco, you were paying John D. Rockefeller. If you lit a lamp in Europe or Asia, you were likely paying him too. He was the light of the world. But with great power came great hatred. The public began to fear him. He was no longer a businessman. He was a monster. They called Standard Oil the octopus. Its tentacles wrapped around the State House, the Congress, and the railroads. It strangled competition. It corrupted democracy. Rockefeller did not care about the criticism. He believed he was doing God's work. He believed that competition was a sin. He believed that competition meant waste. It meant duplication of effort. It meant chaos. He was bringing order. He truly believed he was the savior of the industry. To him, the man who undercut prices and caused instability was the villain. The man who stabilized prices and guaranteed supply was the hero. It is a logic that governs many monopolies today. But the laws of the United States were not designed for a creature like Standard Oil. The legal system was built for small local businesses, not global empires. So Rockefeller and his lawyers invented a new weapon: the trust. In 1882, they created the Standard Oil Trust. It was a legal innovation that allowed 9 trustees to hold the stock of 40 different companies across different states. It dissolved the legal barriers between states. It created a single centralized brain for a body that spanned the continent. This was the birth of the modern corporation. Every multinational company today owes its structure to the blueprint drawn up by Rockefeller's lawyers. But the bigger the beast grew, the more it thrashed. The press turned against him. A journalist named Ida Tarbell began to write a series of articles exposing the brutal tactics of Standard Oil. She was the daughter of an oil man who had been crushed by Rockefeller. Her writing was personal. It was sharp. It painted Rockefeller not as a genius, but as a predator. The public outrage grew so loud that the government could no longer ignore it. A new president named Theodore Roosevelt swept into power with a big stick and a promise to bust the trusts. The battle between Roosevelt and Rockefeller was the battle for the soul of the 20th century. It was the state versus the corporation, democracy versus plutocracy. In 1911, the Supreme Court of the United States dropped the hammer. They declared Standard Oil an illegal monopoly. They ordered it to be broken up into 34 separate companies. The octopus was dead, or so they thought. This is the moment where the story usually ends in history books. The bad monopoly was broken. The people won. Justice was served. But that is not what happened. The breakup of Standard Oil was the greatest financial stroke of luck in Rockefeller's life. When the company was split, the shares were distributed to the stockholders. Rockefeller owned a quarter of the stock. As the separate companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Amoco began to trade on the open market, their value skyrocketed. The sum of the parts was worth far more than the whole. Rockefeller's wealth doubled and then tripled. He became the first man in history to accumulate $1 billion. Breaking the monopoly did not destroy his power. It multiplied it, but Rockefeller had already moved on. He had retired from the daily operations of the business years before the breakup. He had turned his attention to a new project. A project far more ambitious than controlling oil. He wanted to control the future. This brings us to the second half of the Rockefeller legacy. The part that you actually live in. Rockefeller looked at society with the same bookkeeper's eye he used on the oil industry. He saw waste. He saw inefficiency. He saw a population that was disorganized and unscientific. He decided to apply the principles of Standard Oil to humanity itself. He began to give his money away. But this was not charity in the traditional sense. He did not just give money to the poor to buy food. That was a stopgap. That was inefficient. He wanted to fix the root causes. He wanted to build systems. He created the Rockefeller Foundation. It was a philanthropic corporation. It was run like a business. Its goal was to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. But well-being is a subjective term. Let us look at medicine. In the early 20th century, medicine was a chaotic marketplace. There were doctors who used herbs. There were homeopaths. There were chiropractors. There were surgeons. There was no standard. Rockefeller asked a man named Abraham Flexner to survey the state of medical education in America. The result was the Flexner Report of 1910. The report was scathing. It argued that most medical schools were substandard. It recommended that medicine be standardized based on strict scientific principles, specifically principles that relied on pharmaceutical drugs and surgery. Rockefeller poured hundreds of millions of dollars into medical schools that adopted these standards. He funded the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, which became the model for every other school. The schools that refused to get on board the schools that taught natural remedies or homeopathy were defunded. They lost their accreditation. They withered and died. Rockefeller created the modern medical establishment. He saved millions of lives by promoting the germ theory of disease and funding vaccines. There is no doubt about that. But he also created a medical system that relies heavily on petroleum-based pharmaceuticals. Remember what Standard Oil produced? Petrochemicals. By shaping the medical curriculum, he ensured that the future of medicine would be a customer of the chemical industry. He integrated the human body into the industrial economy. Is this a conspiracy? No. It is business strategy applied to civilization. It is vertical integration. You create the supply, and you create the demand. Now let us look at education. Rockefeller poured a fortune into the General Education Board. He funded schools and universities across the country. But again, there was a philosophy behind the money. In a famous document, the General Education Board wrote that they did not want to make the people into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. They wanted to create a perfect system where the children would be grateful to be trained in the habits of industry. The industrial economy needed workers. It needed people who could follow instructions. It needed people who could show up on time, stand in a line, and do a repetitive task for 8 hours without complaining. The modern school system, with its bells and its rows of desks and its standardized testing, was not designed to create free thinkers. It was designed to create employees. It was designed to create parts for the machine. Rockefeller and his peers needed a workforce that was smart enough to run the machines, but not smart enough to question who owned them. This is the system you can never escape. When you go to school, you are entering a Rockefeller institution. When you go to the doctor, you are entering a Rockefeller institution. When you fill up your car, you are buying a Rockefeller product. But the influence goes even deeper. It is in the very structure of our economy. Rockefeller proved that monopoly is the natural end state of unregulated capitalism. He proved that the most efficient way to run an economy is to concentrate power in the hands of the few. Look at the world today. Look at the tech industry. We have a few giant companies that control everything. Google controls information. Amazon controls commerce. Facebook controls communication. They are the Standard Oils of the digital age. They use the same tactics Rockefeller used. They buy up competitors. They undercut prices to destroy rivals. They integrate vertically. Amazon does not just sell goods. It owns the warehouses. It owns the trucks. It owns the servers that run the internet. They are efficient. They are reliable. They bring order to chaos. But the price of that order is control. We have traded our autonomy for convenience. We have accepted the cage because it is comfortable and well lit. John D. Rockefeller died in 1937 at the age of 97. He looked like a mummy in his final years. His skin was paper thin. He had given away $500 million. He died believing he was a good man. And in many ways he was. He was a devout Baptist. He never drank. He was a faithful husband. He built the University of Chicago. He eradicated hookworm in the South. But he also demonstrated a terrifying truth about human nature. The drive for order, the drive for efficiency, the drive for perfection inevitably leads to tyranny. He showed that if you want to control the world, you do not need an army. You just need to control the flow of resources. You need to control the bottleneck. For Rockefeller, it was the refineries and the railroads. For the modern world, it is the data centers and the payment processors. The system he created is self-perpetuating. It rewards scale. It punishes the small. It turns citizens into consumers. You can try to escape it. You can move to the woods and grow your own food. But even there you are defined by your absence from the system. And eventually you will need a doctor. You will need a tool. You will need something that was brought to you by the supply chain that began in Cleveland, Ohio in 1870. The lesson of John D. Rockefeller is not about money. It is about the architecture of reality. He showed us that the world is pliable. It can be molded by a single will if that will is strong enough and patient enough. He did not just build a company. He built a labyrinth, a maze of corporations and foundations and institutions that guide the flow of money and power and knowledge. We are all wandering inside that labyrinth. We turn corners thinking we are making our own choices, but we are walking down paths that were paved 100 years ago. So the next time you hear about a billionaire claiming they want to save the world, or fix the education system, or revolutionize medicine, pay attention. They are reading from the Rockefeller playbook. They know that the ultimate product is not oil or software or cars. The ultimate product is society itself. And you are the raw material. Rockefeller won. He won so completely that we forgot the war ever happened. We forgot that there was another way to organize the world. We forgot that efficiency is not the only virtue. We accepted the trade. We got cheap light. We got cheap gas. We got modern surgery. We got the weekend. But we lost the chaos. And in the chaos was our freedom. The story of Rockefeller is a warning. It is a warning that when you give one man the power to fix the world, he will fix it to suit himself. He will prune the garden of humanity until it is neat and tidy and profitable. He will cut down the weeds. But he might also cut down the flowers. As you go about your day today, look around you. Look at the logos. Look at the buildings. Look at the systems that govern your life. Try to see the invisible lines that connect them. Try to see the ghost in the machine. He is still there, watching, calculating, measuring. He is the man who created the system you can never escape. And he is waiting for you to get back to work. Because in the end the ledger must balance. And in the Rockefeller system, everything and everyone has a price. This leads us to the final uncomfortable question. If we are living in a cage built by a dead tycoon, do we even want to leave? The chaos of the pre-Rockefeller world was brutal. It was dark. It was dirty. People died young. Life was hard. Rockefeller offered a solution. He offered stability. He offered a predictable life in exchange for submission to the economic machine. Most of us take that deal every single day. We clock in. We buy the products. We follow the rules. We trust the experts. We complain about the system, but we rely on it. We fear the monopoly, but we love the convenience. We are the children of Standard Oil. We are the beneficiaries of the ruthless consolidation of the 19th century. To reject Rockefeller is to reject the modern world, and very few of us are willing to do that. So perhaps the cage is not locked. Perhaps the door is wide open. But we stay inside because we are afraid of the dark. And John D. Rockefeller knew that. He knew that men fear chaos more than they fear control. He bet on that fear. And he became the richest man who ever lived. The story continues today. The names change. The industries change. But the logic remains. Consolidate. Control. Integrate. The next time you see a merger on the news. The next time you see a small business swallowed by a giant. The next time you see a new regulation that makes it harder for the little guy to compete. Nod your head to the ghost. He taught them well. The system is working exactly as designed. It is efficient. It is orderly. It is profitable. And it is yours. Forever. But understanding the mechanism is the first step to seeing the bars. Economics is not just about money. It is about power. It is about who gets to design the future. Rockefeller designed ours. Who is designing the next one? Look at who controls the data. Look at who controls the artificial intelligence. Look at who controls the genetic engineering. They are the new Rockefellers. And they are building the next cage. Will it be better than this one? Or will it be tighter? That is the question for the 21st century. But to answer it, you must first understand the man who started it all. The man who turned the world into a business. The man who proved that if you control the energy, you control the civilization. John D. Rockefeller. The architect. The titan. The ghost. End of story. But wait, there is one more layer to this. One final twist of the knife. We often think of the economy as a separate thing from our personal lives. We think there is the market, and then there is us. But Rockefeller dissolved that line. By creating the consumer culture, he entered our homes. By creating the corporate culture, he entered our time. By creating the medical and educational foundations, he entered our minds and bodies. He did not just build a monopoly on oil. He built a monopoly on lifestyle. Before the Industrial Revolution, people defined themselves by their communities, their religion, their land. After Rockefeller, people began to define themselves by what they bought and where they worked. I am a Ford man. I work for General Electric. Identity became tied to the corporation. This was the psychological victory of the system. It made us identify with the machine. When Standard Oil was broken up, the shareholders cheered. When the price of gas goes down, we cheer. We cheer for the efficiency that enslaves us. It is a masterpiece of social engineering. And it was done without the internet, without television, without algorithms. It was done with a ledger and a relentless will. Imagine what a man like Rockefeller could do today. Imagine if he had access to your search history, your location data, your genetic code. Actually, you do not have to imagine it, because the people who do have that information are his students. They studied his life. They studied his tactics. They know that the public will forgive almost anything if the service is free or cheap or fast. They know that we will trade our privacy for convenience, just as we traded our economic independence for cheap kerosene. The cycle repeats. The chaos of the early internet is gone. The wild west of the digital age is over. We are in the era of consolidation, the era of the digital Standard Oils. And just like in 1870, the winners are the ones who control the infrastructure, not the content creators. Not the app developers, the ones who own the servers, the clouds, the cables. The pipelines of the 21st century are invisible, but they are just as real as the iron pipes Rockefeller laid across Pennsylvania. And they are just as prone to monopoly. So when you look at your phone screen, remember the kerosene lamp. It is the same light. It is just a different fuel. And the bill is coming due. The Rockefeller legacy is a challenge to every generation. It challenges us to ask, what is the price of order? Is it worth the loss of diversity? Is it worth the concentration of power? Is a messy freedom better than a tidy tyranny? Rockefeller had his answer. He voted for order. Now you have to cast your vote. Every dollar you spend is a vote. Every platform you use is a vote. You can vote for the system, or you can try to build something else. But do not underestimate the difficulty. The system is designed to absorb you, to buy you out, to make you an offer you cannot refuse. Just like the refiners in Cleveland. Sell to me, the system says, and you will be rich. Resist and you will be crushed. It takes a rare kind of courage to say no to the ledger. It takes a willingness to live in the dark. But perhaps that is where the real light is. Not the standardized, uniform, processed light of the monopoly, but the flickering, unpredictable, wild light of freedom. The choice is yours. But remember, the ghost is watching. And he has a very long memory. This is the story of John D. Rockefeller. The man who bought the world, and the man who sold it back to us 1 gallon at a time. Now you know the price. Are you still buying?